All right, let's do this podcast time. Hey, everybody, what's up? And welcome back to my podcast. As I stare outside, there's somebody driving by, and I'm nosy. But, anyways, let's get this podcast started. Welcome back to PBT. All right, gonna make some coffee. Um, anyways, today we are going to be talking about the oh, set that. Yeah, today we're going to be talking about the seventh movie, I think. The seventh movie? Yes, the seventh movie today because it's episode 8 of the podcast. Last week, I know last week we were talking about the Secretosaurus rock and I how I personally feel like that was like the down the start of like the downfall of this series. Not necessarily saying that any of the later movies are bad except Wisdom of Friends, but like the newer movies, like after after like that gonna be enough. I'm trying to think if that'll be enough, or I have to fill it back up. That should be enough though. But and I'm not saying they're like horrible or like even that bad, but like compared to like the but compared to like two, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, like 11, 12, 13, 14 aren't as good. And but I feel like 6, like I said last week, I feel like 6 is where it like first started to like decline. I think the only exception between 6 and 14 that wasn't a decline was probably 8. I really enjoyed 8. And I'm one of those people, part of me wants as many Land Before Time movies as they'll make, or if they did make. But a part of me but other parts of me thinks that I don't really think it should have ended at 10, but I do think that was like a good place to end. You know, like Littlefoot meeting his dad for the first time. Yeah, it's not. Hold on. But anyways, yeah, like I was saying, that would have been a good place to end off the series if they had to do so, because I feel like 10 was the last. Because I feel like 10. When did 10 come out? 10 came out in like 2003. 2003, I think. don't hold me to that. But that was the last movie that came out before. Wait, when did 10 come out? Let's see. Source Rock came out to 1998. Stoner Cold Fire came out, which we're going to be talking about today. That came out in 2000. So, yeah, I think 2003, 2004 was when Long Neck Migration came out. But I'd have to look later. But anyways, it's like literally like the best um you know place to like end. You know? Because I feel like 11 to 14 were like really really random and all. Um I I feel like at this point they just like ran out of ideas. The only thing, and I highly doubt we're gonna get a 15th movie, you know, but you never know. And in the business, like there was, I mean, it's never impossible, because there was a almost 9 year difference between between Wisdom of Friends and Journey of the Brave, 13 and 14. But you know, and it's been almost 10 years now since you know the last the last Land Before Time movie came out. And do I miss when they were like pumping out one a year? Because for the longest time they were pumping out like a new Land Before Time movie a year. The only exceptions being between first and second, there was a 2 year difference, I think, between a couple of the movies. I don't remember which ones, like right smack in the middle. And there was and then the later movies they started, spreading them out more and more. So if they're still like spreading them out more and more, like every time they make a new one, then at this point there is probably still a chance that we will get a 15th movie. Now, do I know for sure? Absolutely not. And I'm actually pretty doubtful that we will ever get, another movie. But, at this point, I feel like if they did make another movie, they should make like a Sarah centered movie because, we had Littlefoot with Great Long Neck. We had Petrie for Great Day of Flyers. We had Ducky and Spike for Big Freeze. We had who else? Yeah, that's it. We've pretty much had every movie, all of the main five characters had at least one movie focused on them, except for Sarah, because Littlefoot was the main like I said, Littlefoot was the main focus of Great Longneck Migration. Ducky was the focus of Ducky and Spike. Well, they were kind of put together, but like Spike's nonverbal, so it's kind of like hard to make a movie just about him, you know? But I feel like 8, and we'll talk about it more next week, but I feel like 8 did a good job about making a story about Spike, who is a nonverbal character. And in next week's episode, I want to touch base a little bit on that, because I think that is really cool that they are like the Paleo Pals are all. That's the first time I've ever said that. But they're all friends with this dinosaur who doesn't talk, and they don't treat him any different. But we're going to save the rest of that for next week, so stay tuned. If I remember to talk about it, which I might not. But anyways, we are going to be going a little bit out of order today. We're going to read our fan fiction first. We're reading 3 chapters. If I don't decide to stop breathing in the middle of it. And then we are going to talk about the movie, and I'll give my 2 cents, and then we'll close out. All right, the lake. This is the fanfic we've been reading about Toronto. So let's continue. The Lake of Fire. Sarah took a deep breath. She was no longer sure of what to believe. She had not believed Allie when she had told them a similar story, but that had turned out to be the truth. So, what of this? Petrie's last words had stung. Are you really going to risk losing friends to save pride? That question kept turning over and over in her mind. She had to find an answer that would not make her look like a bad person, nor would it make her lose face. All right, I'll come with you, she said. But if this is all some weak, pathetic joke, I'll make you very sorry. To her, a threat seemed to be a good way to end it. Petrie nodded happily. Me swear this is no prank. Me show you way to others, he said, taking flight once more. Sarah followed him, wondering if she had made the right choice, or if the others were trying to have fun at her expense. Meanwhile, with heavy hearts, Ducky and Spike made their way back to the blocked-up cave entrance. Once there, they both burst into tears, mourning for the loss of their friends. Both tried to comfort the other, but it was of no use. Neither could console, and neither would be consoled. They wondered what on earth they were going to tell the others when they arrived. After Ducky and Spike had come and gone, Littlefoot awoke again to see that this time Allie was conscious. Unaware that he was awake, she was rubbing the side of her head with her foot, having landed on it when they hit the rock, knocking her out cold in the process. Littlefoot rose up to his feet, but he felt a sharp pain shoot up from his right front leg, and his knees buckled, bringing him back down. He let out a cry of pain, making Allie jump. Are you all right? She asked, worried. No, something hurts, he said, wincing in pain. He looks at his right forefoot. On the underside, a sharp stone was stuck in to his skin like a thorn. He had not noticed before, and now the pain was excruciating. Littlefoot gasped in pain and tried to pull it out with his teeth, but the pain was too much to bear. Seeing him recoil, Allie decided to try and get it out for him. She lowered her head and clasped her teeth around, and ignoring Littlefoot's painful protest, pulled it out as quickly as possible. Littlefoot let out another cry of pain and gasped and clasped the wound to his chest, wincing slightly. Thanks, he stuttered, breathing heavily. Allie tossed away the stone and spat out the blood that was still in her mouth. Ew. No problem, she said, smiling apologetically. Sorry about that. Littlefoot took his paw away from his side and shook it a little. Better out than in, I guess, he replied, with a look of gratitude upon his face. Allie licked the wound to soothe the pain, ignoring the blood's foul taste. Littlefoot sighed in relief. Presently, Allie rose and again spat out blood. I can't for the life of me think why sharp teeth like that stuff, she asked. How is it? Littlefoot put it on the ground and gingerly tested his weight on it. The sting had lessened. It's a little better. Thanks again, he said, standing up again. Where he was now, he could see a large bruise on the side of Allie's head. How's that? He asked, concerned. Allie rubbed her head again and stood up. Nothing that won't heal, she said. With her energy replenished and pains fading, the two Longnecks now found themselves faced with the daunting task of making their way to safety. I don't know how we're going to get out of this. One, Littlefoot sighed. They scouted around again. The rock they were standing on was not the only one in the lava pool. There were several dotted around, some close by, others further away. Allie soon thought of a solution. It would be risky, but we could use those rocks to jump over to the edge of the pool. I think we could just make it. Littlefoot was not too enthusiastic about this plan, and neither was she. You're right, he said. It is risky. But I guess we've got to do something. We can't stay on this rock forever. Allie nodded. This was going to be very dangerous. Petrie and Sarah eventually reached the cave's entrance, and now Sarah could see that Petrie had not been lying. Without uttering a word of apology, she began to dig through, sending a shower of rocks in the Petrie's direction, forcing to take to the air once more. On the inside, Ducky and Spike were still mourning the loss of their friends when suddenly the rocks blocking the entrance started to fall away. They were shocked at first, but were relieved to see the faces of Sarah and Petrie on the other side. Soon enough, the debris was cleared and the siblings were able to walk out. Me thought you guys gonna get Littlefoot and Allie first. Were Petrie's first words immediately. They looked downcast and solemn. The other two were, no doubt, surprised by this reaction. Hey, what's the matter with you two? Sarah asked. Wouldn't hurt to say thanks for getting us out of here, and where are Littlefoot and Allie? Ducky took a deep breath. We looked inside the big creepy cave for them. We came to a pool of firewater. Their scent stops at the very edge. They must have fallen in. Yep, Ducky said, bursting into tears again. Sarah and Petrie were shocked by what they heard. There was no way whatsoever that they could ever believe that two of their friends were dead. Ignorant of the misery their friends were going through, Littlefoot and Allie were ready to start moving. One rock was extremely close by, and so they decided this would be a good place to start. Okay then, here we go, Littlefoot gulped. He backed up a little to get a run up and galloped toward the lava. When he reached the edge of the rock, he leapt into the air and sailed across the magma, landing safely on the next rock. He landed heavily on his injured foot, and his legs quivered when he drew it away from the ground. This was going to take a long time. He turned back to Allie. All right, your turn, he yelled to her. Allie nodded and took a deep breath. She made it across safely with no bleeding paw to worry about. They had less space on this rock, and the next one was further away than this had been. This is going to be even harder than I thought, Allie remarked. Are you sure you can jump all right with your foot like that? Seeing Littlefoot stumble when landing had made her feel concerned for his safety. I'll be fine, he assured her. Even if I were a problem, I would have to jump anyway. Can't hang around here. After the words left his mouth, the ground began to shudder violently. Oh no, Allie gasped. Another earth shake. They could each see the problem was even worse than that. The lava was starting to rise. It would not be long before it would flood over the stones, leaving them trapped in the middle of a lake of fire. Nothing else matters. As the lava raised higher and higher, Littlefoot and Allie were running dangerously low on time. There was no time to make plans and work out routes. They gave in to instinct, and running and jumping from rock to rock, old pains forgotten. Neither paused when they came to a jump to see if they could make it. Neither stopped to plan a route to the edge. No time to stop, no time to plan, no time to think. Only time to act. More by luck rather than judgment, Allie found herself on a rock near to the edge of the pool. She took a deep breath and made the final jump. She landed safely and turned to find Littlefoot, still trying to find a way to safety. Worrying, Allie shouted encouragement to him. Come on, you can do it. It's not much further, she screamed to him. Littlefoot reached a high rock, and they both watched in horror as the lava engulfed on every other stone, cutting off any chance of escape. While the fate of Littlefoot and Allie remained unknown to Sarah, Ducky, Petrie, and Spike, they could do nothing but weep for their friends, each feeling indirectly responsible for the supposed tragedy, now staring at them in the face. After an age, Sarah stood up. Come on, she said in a shaky voice. It's dangerous out here, and there's nothing more we can do to help Littlefoot and Allie. We have to get back to the valley. The others knew she was right. They slowly rose to their feet and set off. As they walked, Petrie flew over to Sarah. Sarah had finally had enough arguing and decided to put an end to it. Hey, Petrie, she called to him apprehensively. Yeah? Petrie replied, turning to her. Ducky and Spikes walked on a bit, knowing that this did not concern them. Sarah continued, I want to apologize for what I said before about you and your uncle. I'm sorry. It took her an age to get the words out, but for one who did not often say sorry, this had been one of her better apologies. Petrie smiled sadly. That's okay. Me sorry too. Each forgave the other, and at the last moment the argument was finally over. But as Petrie took his old place up on Sarah's back, he could not help feeling that it had taken the deaths of two of their best friends to help them see the light. Back inside the cave, the earthquake finally ended and the lava stopped rising. However, Littlefoot was still trapped. Ali, safe on the other side of the pool, called out to him. "Are you okay, Littlefoot?" she called. Though trapped, he was no worse for wear. "Yeah, he called back, "but I think we have a problem. Hang on, let me look around a little." "Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere," he shouted. Allie rolled her eyes at this remark and began searching for a way to help her trapped friend. She saw a large rock, very long in particular, leaning over the lava, just a little. It didn't stretch far enough for Littlefoot to make reach it yet. There was a fairly large boulder, which was supporting the rock and preventing it from falling in. If the boulder was moved away, the rock would fall and make a bridge for Littlefoot to walk across. "I wish Sarah was here to help with this," she thought. She started to push against the boulder, hoping the rock would not crush her. When its support was gone, she came up with an idea to prevent that from happening. Instead of pushing it to the side, she pushed it toward the lava, keeping it under the large rock the whole time. This allowed the large rock to drop slowly to a point where Littlefoot was able to jump up and grab onto it. Allie ran around to the other end of the rock, climbed on, and ran over to help him up, offering him her tail. He grabbed it and she lifted him up. "Oh boy," Littlefoot gasped, panting for breath after the struggle. "Thanks." Allie smiled in return and looked at her tooth-marks covered tail. "I guess it makes up for the time I bit him on the tail," she thought, fondly remembering the trick she had played on him just before they met each other face to face. "Come on," she said cheerfully. "We still have to find that way out." So they continued onward, never knowing that the way in was unusable again. Not that that mattered. It was not long before they finally found another exit, which led them straight back into the valley. "We're back," Littlefoot cried, running and jumping about playfully. Allie laughed and joined him, and they raced about together, finally out of harm's way. Meanwhile, Sarah and the others were still making their way back to the valley, their hearts heavy. As they walked around a bend, they heard several familiar roars. An instant later, four velociraptors jumped from the rocks above, brandishing their claws. "Ah, not now," Sarah moaned in frustration. As the pack started to surround them, Petrie had an idea. He flew away from the shark teeth over to a small rock. He picked it up and flew back to the group. Petrie soon figured out which shark tooth was the leader and dropped his rock on him. Enraged by this defiance of his leadership, the beast called to the other shark teeth, and they chased after Petrie. Of course, they were unable to reach the small flyer, no matter how high they jumped. During this commotion, the others understood that Petrie was trying to make a diversion and took the opportunity to run. However, the shark teeth saw them running away and gave chase. Petrie flew after them, trying to peck one of them in the back. At last, the valley came into view. There were still a good 200 meters left, and the shark teeth were gaining. From where he was, Petrie could hear Ducky hurrying Spike along like a jockey. "Come on, Spike, you must run, you must," she yelled in his ear. Spike looked back for 1 second and immediately increased his pace, whimpering like a dog. The pack continued to draw closer, but Petrie could finally see that his friends were going to make it. Just as the sharp teeth lunged for them, they ducked into a small tunnel leading into the valley. Petrie took to the air. Just as the pack hit the wall, he flew through the tunnel himself and found his friends cheering, giddy with relief. However, this happiness was short-lived, for now it was time to think about what to tell Littlefoot's grandparents. "We must tell," Sarah said. "They deserve to know." "They do," Ducky agreed sadly. Petrie and Spike nodded in agreement, and they set off. However, when they reached Watcher's Hill, they heard two voices laughing and cheering. "Well, looks like somebody's having fun tonight," Sarah said bitterly. Petrie flew into the air, listening hard. "Wait," he said, as the others started to leave. "Voices sound familiar." Curious, the four dinosaurs ran up the hill, and at the top, who should they see but Littlefoot and Allie, chasing after each other playfully. For one moment, all Sarah, Ducky, Petrie, and Spike could do was stand there, their mouths wide open in shock. An instant later, they ran over to their friends, filled with happiness. Littlefoot and Allie turned to see them coming. "You're alive!" Sarah yelled happily. You are," Ducky added, ecstatic. Petrie hugged them both, and Spike licked them. Needless to say, the two longnecks were very confused by the actions of their friends. "What are you guys talking about?" Allie asked in bewilderment. "We thought you were dead," Petrie cawed, flying in circles above their heads. "Why?" Littlefoot asked. It was not until now that everyone realized how exhausting the day's events have been. "We'll explain later, but now let's play." And so they did. When the sun started to set, they played as they used to. Old arguments were forgotten. Littlefoot and Allie both agreed that the matter of the lost souls could be resolved another day. Petrie would be angry that the topic was brought up for a second time. But this day, that did not matter. All that mattered was that the six of them were alive, healthy, and getting along. For that one evening, nothing else mattered. Peace for now. While Littlefoot and his friends played, the sky turned from an icy blue to a fiery orange to a jet black. Watcher's Hill was now illuminated by the moon's light rather than the sun. Though they were exhausted by the day behind them, they continued to play together, something they had not done as a whole group since Toronto arrived. At last, the happy time came to an end when Sarah's father's voice rang over the hill. "It's time for bed, Sarah," he yelled. Sarah stopped trying to tag Ducky and looked up. After a few seconds, Ducky's mother could be heard calling her as well. "Ducky, Spike," they started to leave, Petrie with them, agreeing to meet back here again tomorrow after breakfast. As they left, Littlefoot sighed happily. Felt good to finally be able to play with his friends again. All too quickly, it dawned on him that his grandparents had not seen him since yesterday. It would now be consumed with worry. "I've done this bit too many times," he thought to himself. Knowing that could not be helped, he made his way home. Allie came with him as he told her of a very small cave which lay near his nest. Allie could tell by the look on his face that he was worried about what he was going to tell his Grandparents. Don't worry, she said comfortingly. Families can get angry at you sometimes, but it never lasts. Littlefoot smiled, somewhat weakly, but could think of no words to say. Just keep thinking to yourself. At least I don't have Sarah's dad, she joked. That was enough to get Littlefoot to chuckle a little. Thanks, he said. Do you have a mantra I can use to feel less worried about what is going to happen with Petrie tomorrow? Allie laughed. I've been working on one, she said, feeling light-hearted, but it's not ready yet. Keep working then, Littlefoot replied. I think I'm going to need it. Soon enough they reached the nest. Littlefoot showed Allie the way to the cave and bade her good night. Now it was time for him to deal with his grandparents. At least I don't have Sarah's dad. At least I don't have Sarah's dad, he thought to himself as Allie instructed. Meanwhile, Toronto was yet again inside the smoking mountain, checking up on the firewater. Since it had started to drop down, he had been in there almost every minute of the day. Had he not wanted to appear inconspicuous, he would have slept there too. Once again, it was still not quite low enough for him to pass through. There was definitely progress being made. He made his way out of the cave and took to the air. On the way back to his sister's nest, when he arrived, he found Petrie being subjected to his mother's wrathful gaze. Soon, since he had not returned home this morning, he found himself in the same predicament as Littlefoot. I was out of my mind with worry, she was screeching at him. Toronto decided to intervene, feeling sorry for his nephew. Now then, what seems to be the problem? He asked. Petrie's sleeping place was stone cold this morning, she began. He's been gone all day and didn't think to come see me until now. Petrie hung his tiny head in shame. Toronto pulled her aside to try and reason with her. Petrie watched them, but could not hear anything they were saying. Despite being in trouble, he was happy, as this was the most attention his uncle had given him in quite a while. Finally, Petrie's mother walked away from Toronto and settled down to sleep. Toronto walked back over to Petrie. There now, he said warmly. That's all been dealt with. But from now on, you must make sure to think more about your mother's feelings. Oh, me will, uncle, me will, he vowed. Thanks, he added after a thought. That's quite all right, Petrie, he replied. Now I think it is high time that you get that head of yours down for the night. Though he wanted to stay up and talk with Toronto, he suddenly felt drained. He realized now that he had not slept since the night before last. He collapsed to the ground, asleep as soon as his head hit the floor. While Petrie slept, Toronto perched at the entrance to the cave. Up here, he grinned diabolically. Soon, he thought. Soon. Needless to say, Littlefoot, like Petrie, had to suffer his grandparents' tongues when he arrived, but now it was morning and time for him to meet with the others. After a small, quick breakfast, Littlefoot said goodbye to his grandma and grandpa and made his way to Allie's cave. They had all agreed to meet at Watcher's Hill, but Littlefoot knew that Allie was not very familiar with the Great Valley's layout, and so he felt it his duty to show her the way. However, when he arrived, he found that Allie had already left. By following her scent, he realized that she had found her way back to Watcher's Hill with no help required, and she was now playing hide and seek with Ducky and Spike. She soon noticed Littlefoot and called over to him. "Hey, what took you so long?" she asked. Littlefoot smiled and ran over to her. He should have guessed that a wanderer like Allie would easily be able to retrace her footsteps. "So, how did things go with your grandparents?" she asked, while Ducky continued to search for Spike. "Not that well," Littlefoot replied, "but they always have to deal with things like this, so I guess they're getting pretty used to it." Allie changed the subject. "I've been thinking about talking to the others again about the lost souls. I don't want Petrie to get angry again, at least not so soon after we all just got back together." "You're right," Littlefoot agreed. "I've been thinking the same thing myself. We'll have to tell them sooner or later, but I think it can wait for now." Allie nodded and they split up to make it harder for Ducky to find them. However, they would never know that their hesitation would make things that much harder. While they played, instead of trying to convince everyone of the truth, the lava inside the Smoky Mountain was dropping ever lower. Meanwhile, Petrie had slept in late and now decided to fly around a little and stretch his wings before meeting up with the others. As he flew along, he saw his uncle flying towards the smoking mountain. Curious, Petrie followed, wondering what on earth he was doing. Toronto soon landed by the base of the mountain, and the two flyers came to meet him. Petrie flew down to terra firma and stayed out of sight. Petrie watched as Toronto entered the tunnel with Rax at his side. As they went in, Petrie, just as Littlefoot had done 2 days ago, overheard them talking about the lost souls. Petrie was stunned. "Uncle, how could you?" he thought. Ever since Allie had first told him about the lost souls, he had been afraid of it all being true, and now his fears had finally come to light. Paralyzed by his uncle's actions, Petrie did not see a figure creeping up behind him. In an instant, the world went black as Ark clapped his hand over Petrie's eyes and lifted him off the ground. Petrie tried to struggle and strain, but it was no use. When he finally saw the light of day again, he saw Toronto staring at him in the face. And that's where we're gonna end the fanfic today. Now let's get into talking about the um the Stone of Cold Fire, which is ironically the movie in the real Land Before Time series, not a fan fiction that has Toronto in it. So let's get into it. Late one night, Littlefoot sees a meteor fall from the sky and crashing into the volcano, Three Horns Peak. When Littlefoot describes it to the next morning, the adults in the Great Valley do not take it seriously. Duh, they never do. Except for two mysterious newcomer dinosaurs, the rainbow beaks and long-necked rainbow faces. The rainbow faces tell them of possibilities, of wonders beyond what they know, and suggest the rock may be a magic stone of cold fire. Littlefoot tries to tell Sarah's father He knows where the flying rock was and how to find it, but Sarah's father warns Littlefoot of the mysterious beyond, especially parts with volcanoes are off limits. Littlefoot's grandfather agrees and tells Littlefoot that until some far walkers leave the Great Valley, it would be better for them not to worry about the flying rock. Toronto, the outcast uncle of Littlefoot's friend Petrie, overhears the conversation and conspires to find the rock to use its powers to control the valley. Toronto gets Petrie, who idolizes him, to tell him the rock's location. Littlefoot's friend Ducky overhears Toronto's plan, before she can warn the others, Toronto and his cronies, Rinkus and Sierra, capture her and set out to find the stone. Upon discovering Ducky's abduction, the adults tell the young ones how Toronto previously led some of their herd during the search for the valley and encountered a pack of fast spiders. Toronto was able to escape, but the event left him emotionally scarred and he was exiled as punishment for leading his followers into danger. Because the adults are slow to reach a decision, Littlefoot, Petrie, Sarah, and Spike off by themselves in search of Ducky. Meanwhile, Ducky escapes the Flyers and falls into a cave while fleeing after the children. While fleeing, after the children find her, Ducky comforts Petrie, who is distraught about his uncle's actions, by stating he could tell that Toronto is the least wicked of the three Flyers, and has potential to do good. Rinkus and Sierra suddenly recapture Ducky and pursue the children in violation of Toronto's orders, but the children outsmart him. As the Flyers fly away, Petrie tells them not to go, and a thunderstorm comes later, and the adult dinosaurs meet, and Grandpa Longneck tells Petrie's mother to find another flyer to help her find the children. Meanwhile, Sierra displays mutinous feelings towards Toronto, but Rinkus convinces him to hold off betraying him until they find the stone. The children pursue the Flyers, hoping to reach the stone before them. The Rainbow Faces help them get there, where they discover the stone. Now,